This is CBC Here and Now.
And the spring water in the woods and the smells of things and the women. The women!
The original Rowdy Man exits the stage one last time. Tonight, we mark the loss of a beloved Newfoundland legend, actor Gordon Pinsent.
I would hope that the RNC revisit this and reinstate her position as far as community outreach is concerned.
People are speaking out about Stella, the RNC therapy dog who was sidelined from community outreach. We'll have that CBC Investigates update and
everything that I do in the community, she is my role model.
And she is my role model too.
Meet Loydetta Quaco and Grace Oquera. The two women have been named CBC Black Changemakers for the province. That feature story coming up a little later in the show. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. We begin tonight with the loss of a local legend. Newfoundland actor Gordon Pinsent died on Saturday at the age of 92, and reaction is still pouring in. Originally from Grand Falls, Windsor, he spent 6 decades in the film and television industry, and his family says he loved this country and its people, purpose, and culture to his last breath. The CBC's Lisa Shing reports on the legacy that Pinsent has left behind.
We were in love with each other.
Once a shy, awkward child growing up in Newfoundland, Gordon Pinsent found freedom in acting.
Get back and sit down!
In the 60s, Pinsent became a household name that lasted more than 6 decades.
I made up my mind a long time ago to have the same enthusiasm one year after the other, because the stories are different, the people are different.
Think about it.
The actor appeared in more than 150 TV shows and movies, including the feature film The Rowdy Man, set in Newfoundland and based on his own novel.
And the spring water in the woods and the smells of things.
Hollywood also recognized his talent, but the role that perhaps defined his career, a husband losing his wife to Alzheimer's in Away from Her.
I'm your husband. It's Grant.
Pinsent has won every major acting prize in the country, but always approached his craft with humor and modesty.
And I ran fast so before they could catch me and say, no, acting is for silly people.
The actor's family announced his death, saying Gordon passionately loved this country and its people, purpose, and culture to his last breath. He was 92.
He had zero ego. Everyone in every crew that I've ever seen him with had so much respect and admiration for him.
From the memoirs.
Pinsent was still prolific even in his later years. At 80, he went viral with a dramatic reading of Justin Bieber's memoir.
Just a regular 16-year-old kid. I make good grilled cheese, and I like girls. Coming back to you.
He also recorded an album of his own poetry.
I think of you often, down on the seagrass.
There's 1,000 interviews, 1,000 plays, 1,000,000 songs, and beautiful poetry. You can have a new Gordon Pinsent experience every single day for the rest of your life by just celebrating the work.
A national treasure who will live on in the hearts of Canadians. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
And we'll have more coverage about the life and times of Gordon Pinsent and some memories from some of his friends. That's coming up in about 40 minutes on Here and Now.
Well, the cold weather continued for a good chunk of the weekend for pretty much most of us. We did see those temperatures below -10 for a lot of areas, still dealing with that cold air thanks to a big ridge of Arctic ridge of high pressure, and that is going to stick around for a little while longer. Now, if we see what's going on right now, most of the coldest air is over Newfoundland and Labrador at the moment. And how long is it going to stick around? Well, at least for tonight, we still got that extreme cold warning in for Lab West, Northern Peninsula, and through the interior, as well as parts of Central. But we've got a couple more days of this cold weather. We should see it stick around at least through Wednesday. By the time we get to Thursday, some warmer, milder air, relatively speaking anyway, still into the minus single digits, but that is going to start to work its way across the island as we head into the weekend. And that pretty much sticks around. We'll talk about that and the rest of the forecast coming up.
We have reaction tonight to a story we brought you last week. On Wednesday, CBC Investigates reported the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary had sidelined its therapy dog from doing outreach in the community. Documents revealed that Stella and her handler had been relegated to internal RNC visits only beginning last summer. Well, tonight, a retired law enforcement officer and the opposition justice critic are weighing in. Here and Now's Ariana Kelland has the latest.
Support grew this week for the RNC's only therapy dog in online comments and this petition. Myra James was watching it unfold.
And started following Stella during COVID on social media. And it just kind of blossomed from there.
James retired from the Hamilton Police Department after 30 years of service and is editor of the International Association of Women Police magazine. That put Stella on the cover. She even traveled to Newfoundland to meet Stella and her handler, Constable Krista Fagan. Now she's disappointed by this step.
Can't put a value on that as far as her being an ambassador, whether she's a dog or not. But she goes out there and she brings smiles to the faces of senior citizens and victims of crime and employees and so on and so forth. So I would hope that the RNC revisit this and reinstate her position as far as community outreach is concerned.
These documents obtained by CBC News show Stella and Fagan were taken off community outreach and victim services work this summer. There appears to have been a directive for the pair to stay inside the RNC building.
I don't understand the reasoning and the rationale behind that, and I think there's a responsibility on the part of the RNC leadership to justify the decision to really demote Stella in terms of the public and the community outreach.
Chief Patrick Roach has declined interview requests from CBC News. In a statement Friday, Roach said Stella would focus on internal support and victim services. That's despite documents showing the RNC stopped Stella's work with the Department of Justice's Victim Services last summer. Roach's statement did not address that decision, and the RNC did not respond to a follow-up inquiry specifically about it. Helen Conway-Ottenheimer says the silence from RNC leadership and the Justice Minister is deafening.
We have the right and the right to have the expectation of the police to communicate in the society that they serve. And without that accountability, without that transparency, that is very troubling.
Justice Minister John Hogan has also declined an interview and says he isn't involved in operational decisions made by the RNC. Ariana Kelland, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, the Nurses Union says it's being left out of recruitment efforts by government to attract more healthcare workers to the province. The provincial government is trying to find nurses to relocate here from India. It's also looking to entice doctors from Ireland to move here. And today it announced a new recruitment drive. The province is also trying to attract physicians from the United Kingdom. But the Nurses Union has a caution tonight. Recruitment efforts won't work on their own.
It's no good to bring people in to our system and into our province if we don't have mentorship for them and support when they get here. And it's no good to bring them in and face the same workplace conditions that our members are currently facing. We need to address the workplace conditions, we need to address the retention issues, get at the issues that are causing people to leave the system.
Yvette Coffey has much more to say about the recruitment of nurses in this province. Stay tuned for my full interview with the head of the Nurses Union coming up in about 20 minutes on Here and Now. Well, police in St. John's believe they have found the person responsible for 3 armed robberies that happened in a span of 35 minutes on the weekend. A 34-year-old man is facing a total of 30 charges. They include robbery, carrying a concealed weapon, and breaking court orders, such as being in possession of a firearm. The man is alleged to have held up gas stations on Stavanger Drive and Topsail and Torbay roads between 4:25 and 5 o'clock Saturday morning. After that, police went to other gas stations to alert workers to the robberies, and while they were at one gas outlet on Portugal Cove Road, they noticed a man in the parking lot who matched the description of the suspect, and that's when he was arrested. Well, now to the West Coast, the Halibut First Nation has hired a Corner Brook City Councillor to manage its offices. Charles Pender will oversee business, programs, and the management of 75 staff in 6 locations. Pender, who is a former city mayor, says he'll recuse himself from all dealings with the Halibut in his role as councillor. Well, it's this province's most valuable fishery, and there's uncertainty this year about whether it can be economically viable. But the latest stock assessment shows the snow crab resource off this province's shores has recovered strongly from near collapse. Here now's Terry Roberts reports.
The latest stock assessment of these tasty and long-legged crustaceans has been released, and it reveals the ocean floor is once again teeming with snow crab.
We've seen increase in the last few years in exploitable biomass. That's our main stock status indicator.
Not long ago, alarm bells were going off. The so-called exploitable biomass of snow crab had shrunk to historic lows. But scientific data and reports from harvesters shows the snow crab has clawed its way back, with some words of caution.
We are warning, I guess, or just putting in people's mind that there may be a limit to the growth in the short term, but we are seeing positive results for 2022.
It's good news for the Fisheries Union.
So we have a great resource. We got stuff to look forward to in crab. No question about that. Even some of the areas that were not so good are showing up a little positive. So that's good news.
But while the crab is abundant, there's big questions about its marketability. Snow crab became a hot item during the pandemic. Quotas soared, and harvesters cashed in a big way. But the market collapsed last year. Big volumes of crab remain unsold. And in a sign of just how worried industry leaders are, the powerful Fisheries Union and the associations that represents processing companies, 2 groups with a deep history of conflict, have begun brainstorming in a bid to salvage this year's harvest. When asked about the status of this unprecedented cooperation, the FFAW president had this to say.
With ourselves and ASP, that's confidential at this point in time.
So despite the healthy crab stock, big questions remain. Will prices be high enough to entice harvesters to untie their boats? And if not, what will the 2023 crab season look like? As for this year's total allowable catch, that will be revealed by DFO in the coming weeks. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, still with the fishery and stock assessments, fish harvesters are calling for the Atlantic Canadian mackerel fishery to reopen this year. The FFAW held a news conference today to say federal fisheries officials made a mistake when they closed it last year. Here now's Mark Quinn reports.
Last year, DFO said Atlantic Canada's mackerel stock was in trouble and must be protected. The fishery was closed in March. But the union that represents fish harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador says the Federal Fisheries Department got it wrong.
We've brought you here today to draw attention to DFO's colossal mishandling of the Atlantic mackerel fishery and the failure of DFO science to accurately estimate the mackerel biomass.
Robbie Green took part in DFO's herring survey on a large part of the northeast coast last fall. Green says he saw a lot of mackerel.
I've never seen an abundance of mackerel as we have this year. It's unprecedented, and it was everywhere.
And he's not alone. Last year, after hearing similar reports, the FFAW's science department surveyed union members.
85 of the responses coming in said that mackerel was more abundant or much more abundant than it has been in the last 5 years. That's not 1 or 2 people. That's a consistent signal.
Fish harvesters are questioning if DFO's science is keeping up with climate change, warming water temperatures that could be pushing mackerel to spawn earlier and further north.
Let's do the work and see where the disconnect is to, but they're not doing the work. This is what we need done. And don't close our fishery and affect our livelihoods based upon the assumption of poor science.
The union says up to 700 people harvest mackerel in this province, and the landed value of mackerel in Newfoundland and Labrador in 2021 was almost $400,000. Industry and federal fisheries officials are meeting in Halifax this week to discuss the fate of this year's mackerel fishery. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Now taking a look at sports, a young hockey player from this province is on the move in the NHL. Mount Pearl's Zach Dean was traded to the St. Louis Blues yesterday in exchange for forward Ivan Barbashev. 20-year-old Zach Dean was selected by the Vegas Golden Knights in the 2021 NHL draft. He'll now look to make it to the big leagues with the Blues. Dean also won a gold medal with Team Canada at this year's World Junior Hockey Championship. Well, next week, the province's Special Olympics Winter Games will be kicking off in central Newfoundland. They'll take place in Grand Falls, Windsor and Gander from March 9th to the 12th. And a delegation of athletes from Labrador West are gearing up for the Games. Here Now's Daryl Din has a behind-the-scenes look at their training.
So this year we have a great group going out, 23 of us in total. So that's 10 athletes who are participating in snowshoeing, cross-country skiing and curling, and we have 13 volunteers who are coaches.
With just days left before the games, the athletes are getting in their final practices. Competing in the cross-country skiing event are these two returning athletes.
And what sport are you competing in?
Skiing in Grand Falls, Windsor.
Champagne. And are you excited to be going out to Grand Falls, Windsor soon?
Yes. So much excited.
And what do you love about skiing?
I like double pulling and doing stuff around the stadium.
Huh? Go fast. Go fast.
So how long have you been snowshoeing?
A year.
And do you hope to bring home the gold?
Yeah. Yeah. And have a lot of fun.
And is this your first time curling for the games?
Yes.
And have you been having fun practicing for curling?
Yes, we did. We got new friends out there and all good times, so yeah.
And this past week I've gotten out to see all of the athletes in practice, and it's night and day, and it's just amazing to see all that progress. You know, we're all alike in so many ways, and we're also different, and diversity is a fact and inclusion is a choice, and that's certainly something that we see around here, and it's just wonderful to be a part of.
Regardless if they make it to the podium, the athletes have their oath to remember what's important.
Let me win. Let me win. Whatever cannot win. Let me be brave.
Daryl Din, CBC News, Labrador City.
While many people are staying inside to avoid the cold snap that has the province in its grip, these people intentionally walked the streets of St. John's on Friday night. We'll explain why.
Well, the Northern Lights certainly put on a show this weekend. We'll talk about if we can see them again tonight and how long this cold is going to stick around.
not traveling on the sea ice, that's one of the biggest things of our culture. You know, people say it's a part of our culture. It's not a part of our culture. It is our culture to travel on the sea ice.
The land and the sea is who I am. It's what keeps me alive. It's my heartbeat.
A 3-part series about sea ice in Labrador and the impact it's having on the traditional Inuit way of life. Part 1, Adaptation. That's coming up tomorrow on Here and Now.
This weather update is brought to you by the Healthcare Foundation Home Lottery. VIP prize deadline is midnight March 10th. Order tickets now at hcfhomelottery.ca.
Oh, this cold is really sticking around. We were talking earlier, it really feels like this has been an extended period of time, like we haven't experienced this in a while.
We certainly have not. In fact, temperatures today were around -11. Let's take a look at where they were across the board. -11 in St. John's, -10 in Bonavista. We finally cracked above the -10 degree mark for Cape Race at -8 today, and that's really the case all along the south coast. Now, for Labrador, temperatures are into the -teens, so really moderating for you considering temperatures were in the -20s. But where does this leave us? At the moment, the coldest stretch, I showed this last week, but the coldest stretch between of -10 or lower, we are at 4-day streak, I should say. So that hasn't happened since 1979. Now tomorrow, in St. John's anyway, it does look like those temperatures are going to be below -10 again, and that means we could see the longest 5-day stretch, which hasn't happened since 1975. So we're going to keep an eye on that forecast. But it isn't going to last much longer. We're looking at these temperatures after tomorrow. That should be it for the -10 anyway. They're only going to bump up a degree or two, but I bet you that'll feel much warmer considering those wind chills have been in the -20s for a good chunk of the weekend. That's where we're sitting right now. It's -12 in St. John's, and wind chill values -teens, -20s. And then up across Labrador, much colder. It's in fact feeling like -35 in Nain at the moment. So looking at the temperatures overnight tonight, -20s for most of Labrador. Lab West though, -37 will be your overnight low. And then we're dipping into those -20s again for the Northern Peninsula, the interior, parts of Central as well. Otherwise, our temperatures should be in the -teens along the coast, the west coast, south coast, and eastern portions of Newfoundland. Now, as we head through the overnight tonight, wind chill values, we do have an extreme cold warning still in place for Lab West. Your wind chills will be into the -40s by the time we get into the early morning hours tomorrow, and otherwise -30s across the rest of Labrador into the Northern Peninsula and then parts of Central as well. And that's why that extreme cold warning is still in place for the Northern Peninsula, the interior, Green Bay, White Bay, Grand Falls, Windsor, Deer Lake, and the interior, like I said. Otherwise, our wind chills are still going to be cold into the -20s. So last night there was an incredible storm, an electromagnetic storm, which caused some northern lights to be dancing up across Labrador. Keith always captures some beautiful shots of the northern lights. This one is no exception, but in fact I saw some reports through Millertown seeing the northern lights, and it looks like we're going to see the aurora again tonight, especially up across Labrador. Likely not quite as brilliant. There's still a storm, but it looks like that low on the horizon line should make it to about the Northern Peninsula, maybe parts of Green Bay, White Bay. So if you want to brave the cold tonight and go check it out, it looks like another nice night because we are going to see some fairly clear skies for the most part, so to go out and enjoy it. But again, you're certainly going to have to bundle up. Just taking a look at the forecast for tonight, you can see there will be some clearing in the clouds as we get into the early morning hours tomorrow, which is the best time to view the northern lights anyway, but generally just some onshore flurries continuing for the west coast. This shouldn't accumulate too much through the overnight, and that will generally continue through the afternoon tomorrow. Maybe a few periods of clouds, but still sitting under that ridge, which means the cool temperatures are going to stick around, but also some sunshine. There's that couple of centimeters I was talking about. That'll take us through to Wednesday morning. And then as far as those temperatures are concerned tomorrow, -11. So like I said, if we do see that temperature below -10, that will be a 5-day streak for St. John's. As we head towards and along the southern areas of the island, between -8 and or -7 and -9, I should say, and then the west coast, you're looking at your temperatures into the minus double digits as well. Up across Labrador, lots of sunshine, temperatures into the minus teens. I do see some minus single digits in the forecast, at least through the end of the week. So I'll get into that coming up.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, hundreds of people braved the cold in St. John's this weekend, walking the downtown core for the annual Coldest Night of the Year fundraiser. St. John's was one of many cities across the country taking part in that event. It's organized by the nonprofit group Choices for Youth, which aims to raise awareness and funds for young people struggling to find housing. Here Now's Henrika Wilhelm reports.
I mean, it's most certainly cold. And that, says Katie Keats from Choices for Youth, is quite fitting for their message. Homelessness is hard, especially in the winter. This year, the walk raised over $68,000, money that supports the Choices for Youth St. John's Outreach Center. On average, says Keats, the nonprofit organization supports between 1,000 and 1,300 youth every year. In the last couple of years in particular, we've seen those numbers stay kind of steady, but also the challenges that young people are coming to us have been compounded. The pandemic hit everybody hard as an individual, and some people who never faced challenges before have more challenges, and those challenges of young people actually those barriers keep climbing. Walkers faced a wind chill of -23, guided by volunteer route marshals like Jacob Martin. He was part of the event for the third time. While staying warm was top of mind for him, the fundraiser's cause was also present.
Some people are so much more vulnerable to these conditions than other people, and at the end of this, we do get to go home and warm up, and that's not an option for everybody. So that's important to keep in mind, I think, when we're out there.
Over the course of the past 10 walks, says Keats, over $380,000 have been raised. Henrika Wilhelm, CBC News, St. John's.
The Registered Nurses Union says the number of vacant nursing positions in the province is on the rise.
A high percentage of our members are experiencing burnout. They're mentally, they're physically exhausted.
Coming up, we'll speak with the union president about why she thinks government should spend more time on retention than recruitment.
Can we for a moment longer hear the sounds of friends nearby?
Friends describe him as the beacon of Newfoundland and Labrador arts. Ahead, a look back at the life and work of Gordon Pinsent. The Registered Nurses Union says the number of vacant nursing positions in the province is on the rise. The union says, according to government data, the number of vacant positions rose by 137 between April and October of last year, an increase of 22% in a 6-month period. Now, the union is raising concerns about those numbers as it's in the middle of contract negotiations with government. I spoke with Union President Yvette Coffey this afternoon. When you see those numbers, that increase of 137 vacant positions, what does that tell you?
That tells us that we're not doing good on retaining the people we have. We know that a high percentage of our members are experiencing burnout. They're mentally, they're physically exhausted. They're leaving permanent positions to go casual, giving up their pension, their health benefits to go casual in order to get one, more pay, and other is to get more flexibility, more control over their own work life. They're also leaving to go with private agencies, which are offering 2 to 3 times the salary of the registered nurses and nurse practitioners currently in our system. We are the lowest paid in Canada at the present time, registered nurses and nurse practitioners. And we are competing not only nationally, but we're competing globally with the growing nursing shortage.
And these numbers, the 137 was between April and October of last year. So that was shortly before I think government started this big push, this big recruitment strategy. You know, Ireland, India, and today they announced the UK. Do you think that you're going to start to see a change in those numbers? Do you think that we'll start seeing fewer vacant positions in the province because of that?
I think the biggest issue we have, we can recruit people. I mean, we can bring in 700 registered nurses from India. However, if we do not retain the people we currently have in the system, we're never going to fill all those vacancies. We're losing people every day. We're bleeding registered nurses and nurse practitioners. The workload is untenable. The mandatory overtime, the 24-hour shifts. We need to fix the workplace so that we have healthier workplaces. The increased violence in healthcare is an alarming statistic over the past few years that's trending upward. We need to address the issues in healthcare and the issues in the workplaces that are impacting registered nurses and nurse practitioners and their work lives.
A lot of these conversations that we're having now, a lot of these issues have been raised so many times in the past. What needs to happen to change the situation for nurses in the province?
Well, right now we're at the bargaining table, and this is a critical round of bargaining for registered nurses and nurse practitioners. We need to show them that they are valued and that they are respected. And part of that is making sure that we're competitive. We're competitive in the market for salaries. As I said, we are the lowest paid in the country at present. And every single province is competing with each other, trying to get registered nurses and nurse practitioners. We've also seen, for the first time, a massive influx of private agency nurses. So privatization of nursing services because of the shortage. That needs to stop. We need to value and respect the people who are working in the system and holding it together right now.
You mentioned that the union is in the middle of negotiations now with government. What would you say to someone who would see this as kind of a negotiating strategy right now by raising these concerns?
Well, of course, it's always a tactic when you talk about money. However, the facts are the facts. We are the lowest paid. There's great opportunities out there right now for registered nurses and nurse practitioners. It's the law of supply and demand. And if we're going to keep the people in the system and keep our healthcare system going, we need to recognize that we need to be competitive. The lack of nursing resources has long-term care beds closed, it has surgeries being delayed or cancelled, and procedures being delayed or cancelled. And if we're ever going to get to where the Health Accord wants us to go, to get 35 community care clinics up and running, we need nurse practitioners. We need to do something to post positions for nurse practitioners. We need registered nurses, and we need all the other healthcare providers. If we're ever going to get there, we have to tackle the human resource issues that we're having in our healthcare system, because that's what's causing our healthcare crisis.
Well, the province's Department of Health and Community Services is weighing in with a lengthy statement telling CBC in part a number of initiatives were announced in 2022 to address the challenges facing nurses, including bonuses and additional compensation totaling $10 million. It says new nurses will help lighten the workload and ideally improve work-life balance, and that nursing students in the province are being offered conditional job offers upon graduation. Government says the number of nursing seats across the province has also increased. Returning now to the life and legacy of Gordon Pinsent. The iconic actor was born in Grand Falls, Windsor, and appeared in more than 150 film and television roles, earning every major acting award in Canada. Pinsent died Saturday at the age of 92, surrounded by his family. Here's a look back at some of his work, and you'll also hear more about how Pinsent paved the way for two Newfoundlanders who followed in his footsteps.
Who is that man?
I was able to call myself a thespian. I felt even better after I'd looked it up. I used to think a thespian was the woman who lived next door when I was a curious young fella.
Look straight into the mirror. Look deep into your own eyes. Concentrate. And yet. Ow! Push! Ow! Boots! Oh, stupid, idiotic pismire!
I was a little kid sitting by my dad, late 70s, early 80s, and Dad turned in his chair and he said, "You see that man? He played the American president in an American movie, and he is from here."
I was from downtown Newfoundland, downtown Grand Falls, and we didn't have an awful lot going up and so on. But but I would make my way uptown where there was a movie house, and I got from that that I felt I needed to sort of think out my future.
For us, he was Neil Armstrong. He was the first person on the moon. And there was a time when, you didn't think Newfoundlanders could be on the CBC. At a time when in Toronto they sold Newfie joke books and things like that. And he was the exact opposite of that. And he cut the path. He came to Canada as an immigrant. He was born in Newfoundland. And he went off to this other country to find his star. And then eventually Newfoundland and Labrador caught up and we too joined Canada. But by then he had cut this path like he was working through the woods. And then he'd look over his shoulder to bring as many Newfoundlanders with him as he could.
You did this island 100 times. You saw the rocks and the coves and the spring water in the woods and the smells of things and the women. The women!
He and Charm would call me when they would watch, my first big jobs on TV, or they would call me and praise me like they were, family. He had zero ego. Everyone in every crew that I've ever seen him with had so much respect and admiration for him. He was so respectful to everybody that he met. He knew everybody's name. He made it a point to remember. He made it a point to let you know that he remembered.
I'll journey to our garden if I may, where friends with loving ways will be for me to sing to.
It's just such a special thing. I don't think we'll probably won't see a fellow like him again.
Get a little shiver. Has someone actually asked?
Well, the Prime Minister had this to say about Gordon Pinsent's passing, that the actor loved his province and country deeply, that he entertained millions around the world and inspired us to say yes to doing things we love and to pursuing our dreams. Loideta Cueco and Grace Oquera have both been named CBC Black Changemakers for Newfoundland and Labrador. The two women have a special relationship. Each woman says the other has inspired their community work. Here now's Heather Gillis reports.
Loideta Cueco and Grace Oquera are more like sisters than friends, bonded by a shared passion for helping people, especially newcomers to Canada.
Everything that I do in the community, she is my role model.
And she is my role model too.
Both women are integral in Sharing Our Cultures, a nonprofit that helps newcomer youth. Oquera was vice president and president for a while. Cueco, its founder and driving force for more than 20 years. It helps youth with anything from employability skills, finding friends and a sense of belonging, sharing cultural practices in schools, and even their experience with racism.
If there's anything I can do to help anyone, then I will do it. So when we hear about gaps in services in the community for the student, the first thing is how can we get something done?
That giving spirit was on display in the Sharing Our Cultures lobby, where these high school students were using the place to practice dance.
When I came here, since I was dancing back in Africa, I was like, I would wish to have like a dancing like crew, like Afro dancing in here. When I came, I was so devastated, like I was so angry. I was like, oh my gosh, there's nobody who dances Afro dancing in here. And then I met him.
It's about more than choreography. It's an opportunity for Kabasele to share some of his Congolese culture with Kissinger, whose mom is from that country, even though she grew up in Kenya.
And the first time I started listening to the Congo music, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Like, it makes my body move, and also, and then now my mom fully introduced me to the full culture. And now every single day I still learn about the culture. So yeah, it's kind of good to be part of my mom's culture. So
I can say dance is everything for me. I love it, and I love wherever I do it. So just make me feel home, that's all.
And while finding space for students to dance seems like a simple task, some former Sharing Our Cultures participants have told Cueco that the programs and those little things have changed their lives.
When she first came and the parents had moved here from their country of origin, she didn't know anyone and she didn't speak English, but she had to go to school. So every day she went to school and she said she hated it. She said, these are her own words, I hated school and I hated my life. And she said one day the guidance counselor said, why don't you go to that Sharing Our Cultures program? There she met other people who were struggling like she was, met people who spoke her language, and she said it just changed her life, it saved her life, and today she's actually working in the mainland and she's working with immigrant population.
Oquera, too, is making a difference. For more than 20 years, she's been an English as a second language teacher with the Association for New Canadians. To her students, she's more than that. A friend, standing at weddings, visiting people in hospital, sharing meals, teaching with empathy. Because she knows what it's like to start again. Not once, but twice, Oquera says her family lost all of their possessions while living in Uganda.
One thing I believe is so important is the sense of empathy. Like to a number of our clients, they have gone through a lot by the time they arrive in Canada, and then they have to start life anew. And for many of them, they actually have to start by learning the language. They have to learn English first.
She's made a big difference in the lives of so many people. So if we were to stand up and take a poll of the number of people, there'll be stories after stories after stories of people she helped when they were bereaved and didn't know, how they could handle that in a new culture that is very different from their own culture.
Both Oquera and Cueco have been named CBC's Black Changemakers this year. Cueco actually nominated Oquera.
She's just got a heart that's open to help everyone. I can't think of, anyone else that will do that, no matter how tired she is, no matter, how little she has, she's still going to share with others. And that has really stood out to me.
Cueco and Oquera say it's an even sweeter experience that both sisters get to share the recognition together.
She has proven so many times, time and again, that she's a true sister, not only to me, but to many in the community.
I'm gonna cry, just 1 second.
Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
There's a strong pull to come home in this province. Dorothy Pleasance always made the trip. Watch for this archival special, Sunday at 11:30 and Monday at 7.
A St. John's auctioneer calls it one of Gerald Squire's most important series. Paintings that tell an epic spiritual story with a Newfoundland slant. You'll see The Last Supper, the Stations of the Cross, all set in contemporary Newfoundland. The massive set of paintings was created for the Catholic Church in the early 80s, and now they're up for sale.
Wayne Bartlett, I'm auctioneer for past 30 years and owner of Bartlett Auctions. We're doing an auction, of course, and we do a quarterly event, and fine art, antiques, some reproduction work as well, discovery art. But I think you're here today mostly because of the beautiful collection of Mary Queen of the World and St. Patrick's Church, and in particular the work of Jerry Squires. His seminal work, it's two massive panels, 18 feet long, plus the 14 Stations of the Cross, and a lot of the study work that led up to the creation of each. So commissioned by the church back in the early 80s. And again, remember, early 80s in Newfoundland was a tough economic time. Interest rates were double what they are now. We're complaining now, but it was over 13% back then. Outmigration was big, and the church was trying to stay even more relevant, reach more people, and put relevant artwork in the church. There's been many versions of the Last Supper, most famously Da Vinci's Last Supper. But Da Vinci only did a version of it as well. He wasn't the first to do it. He just was the most famous version of it. Certainly wasn't at this scale, at 6 feet by 18 feet, with all local characters as the disciples, local artists, local writers, local musicians, publishers, all friends of Jerry. Even the art critic managed to make it into the scene, and yes, he is Judas. Well, I think it's probably his most important series, his most important storytelling. When you do a landscape, and that overturned stump, which Jerry is famous for, with a cliff face, and it tells a story, sure, but this tells an epic story. This tells a culturally relevant story with its backdrop, but also, of course, a spiritual story, a story that speaks to hundreds of millions of people all around the world.
This weather forecast has been brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. Whatever you're up for this winter, discover experience packages at winterupnl.ca.
Time for a look at the long range. So the cool weather is, well, I should say cold weather. It's not cool.
It's not cool. It's cold.
It's cold. Yeah. So that's going to be sticking around for a little bit longer.
A little bit longer. Definitely tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And then as we head into Wednesday, the potential is there as well. Let's take a look at the forecast for Wednesday. Now, we're still sitting under that ridge. That -11 might be a bit too cold as far as the forecast is concerned. There are some models that are pointing at minus single digits, just barely. But if we do keep this streak going, that will be 5 days, in fact, 6 days actually, as far as those temperatures below minus 10 or below. So certainly going to keep an eye on that one, but the temperatures are starting to warm up and they will continue to do so as we head through the end of the week. We're still looking at that potential for lots of sunshine, but there's still the potential for a few flurries for at least Labrador, Lab West, and then parts of eastern Newfoundland as well as we head through the day on Wednesday. You can see temperatures for Cartwright, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, into the minus 13 degree range. But Nain, you'll be hovering around minus 21 through the day on Wednesday. Now, taking a look at the forecast through the overnight and into Thursday morning, this area of low pressure stays offshore, and that's good, but we are still sitting under that ridge. That ridge is keeping it there, but things are starting to get a little bit closer to the island, so areas for coastal areas of Labrador may see some flurries with this, and we could get into some of that flurry activity for the into the afternoon anyway on Thursday. But at this point, showing some sunshine through the day, temperatures into the minus single digits, so much warmer than it certainly has been. That will start on Wednesday for those of you in Lab West, but overall we're starting to warm up. So this -6 in St. John's through central southern areas of the island certainly going to feel nice considering the temperatures have been much cooler than that. That should be the start of a stretch of temperatures into that -3 to -6 degree range. Overnight lows fairly mild as well, around -8. But flurries starting to come right back into the forecast as we head into Friday, Saturday, watching the potential for something for Friday. We've got to keep an eye on that one. But same forecast for central and western Newfoundland as we see our temperatures into the minus single digits. And then for Labrador, your temperatures are warming up as well. Friday, Saturday, looking at some potential for accumulating snow in the east. And then western Labrador, you'll see your flurries for Friday and Saturday. Going to keep the theme going tonight as far as those northern lights are concerned. This is again in Lab City. Ryan shared this great shot with us. If you have any, send them to Facebook, Twitter, or email them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Oh, that is incredible. And I guess with all of the clear skies lately, must be making for some beautiful scenes.
Yeah, there's nothing better than a cold, clear, crisp night. To see the northern lights. So hopefully we'll see them again tonight, maybe in Labrador.
If you see them, send us a picture.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's it for us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good night.